Everyone, welcome to the future of VMware in Azure. Today, we're going to be talking about business continuity and disaster recovery. I'm Scott Gruenemeier, Principal Technology Specialist with Microsoft, and with me today is Melissa Palmer. Melissa, can you introduce yourself?
Absolutely, Scott. Thanks so much for having me join you today. My name is Melissa Palmer. I'm a principal architect at End-to-End Enterprise Architecture, and you might also know me as VMIS.
Awesome. Thanks, Melissa. So, everybody has faced this challenge before. What happens if my data center goes down or my servers have an outage? Or what if my data gets corrupt or, ransomware gets me? This is a threat that all customers face and a challenge they have to deal with. And I've worked with customers across the country, that literally thousands of customers, and having a reliable business continuity disaster recovery plan that's testable and affordable is a real challenge that, a lot of customers struggle to meet. But in the cloud, in Azure specifically, and Azure VMware Solution, we can really help you get there in a robust, repeatable, and affordable manner. So why is BCDR important? Well, risk. That's the number one problem that we face, whether it's cybersecurity risk or natural disasters or power outages or just the people factor. Somebody bumping a server or spilling a glass of water can cause an outage, or those backhoes, pesky backhoes, pulling up those lines. If you've worked in IT long enough, you've experienced this and you know the pain that it can cause to you and especially to your users and cost to your business.
Exactly. And one thing I want to bring up, Scott, is I kind of chuckled a little bit when you had that backhoe example because I've actually experienced stuff like that. But some people might have chuckled because they're like, the fact that might happen, the risk is so low, I'm not going to worry about it. And that's why I think I've seen a lot of customers in a really bad spot over the last couple of years, because BCDR is kind of this area that often got avoided because when you would look at all the different disasters that could happen, you would say, well, you know what? I'm going to accept this risk because it's more cost effective to not put in a solution. And then in the last couple of years, we've kind of seen the rise of ransomware. And if you're watching this and have not experienced a ransomware attack, I hate to break it to you, but it's probably a matter of when, not if. So it's really important to have those plans in place now and kind of take a fresh look at BCDR in a way that makes sure that we're protecting all our different applications, like Scott said, meeting all different price points, so we can make sure we can keep our business online when the inevitable happens at this point.
Too true, Melissa. Thanks. So, as Azure VMware Solution, if you're in the VMware environment today, we can really simplify how this works for you because, newsflash, VMware in Azure is pretty much close to the same as VMware on premises today. So we can make it very simple to migrate your data center to the cloud and or protect your data center to the cloud from VMware to VMware. Now, we can protect all of your other solutions as well, but we're here today to talk primarily about Azure VMware Solution. But all the same concepts that are in your VMware on premises are in VMware in Azure today. So we have compute with vSphere, storage with vSAN, network with NSX, and we can provide direct access via express route to your on-premises. And we also have access to the rest of Azure solutions, whether that's immutable storage, file share, PaaS services, containers. We have it all available to you within your fingertips.
Exactly. And one of the great things about this is if you're sitting here going, well, I'm not really sure if my current DR plan is up to snuff or I don't really have one. This is a really, really fast path to having some level of disaster recovery solution quickly, right? There's really not much of an operational learning curve. The only difference between Azure VMware Solution and the VMware solution you're using on-prem is you deploy it slightly differently. And, the Azure portal is just so easy to use that you can be up and running with Azure VMware Solution in just a couple hours.
Absolutely. And there is one key difference, Melissa, that we take on the risk for you and a lot of that operational, overhead that really is just not value add to most organizations.
Exactly. No more ordering hardware, managing power and cooling, worry about what happens if a host fails or anything like that. You can get completely out of kind of the data center operations and management game, but still use the VMware vSphere that you're used to using today.
Right. And we can use all of Azure's hybrid tools to help with the management, monitoring, and securing of your workload, whether it lives in on-premises or another cloud or in Azure itself. So again, we can provide consistent solutions like with Azure Arc, Defender for Cloud, Azure Monitor, so that we can really give you a clear window into all your workloads, no matter where they live, so that you can have that visibility to those workloads so that you can see if they need disaster recovery or if they're operating at your business continuity levels at the KPIs that you promised to your business. So really what we're here to do today is align the cloud to your business needs and really show you how you can make this real and do it in an easy and repeatable fashion. Again, we have all the same tools that you have on premises in the cloud, but we're able to offer it in a managed fashion so that we can remove a lot of the overhead. Now, one of those key benefits to you is that we have Azure VMware Solution hardware nodes, extra hosts sitting in reserve. So if one of your hosts fails, right, we're going to be able to migrate the VMs off of it and slot in a new host into your cluster automatically. And you don't have to pay for that host that's sitting there in reserve. That is a huge benefit to having in the cloud. If you were on-prem, you would have to buy those extra nodes and have them sitting there in reserve in case something happened.
Now, and then you actually have to deal with it when it happens, right?
Yeah.
I would actually have to be like, all right, let me figure out what we're going to do here. Oh, I got to call the vendor because now I have a dead node and all this other stuff. You don't really need to worry about any of that anymore.
Yeah. So, we're going to take care of it for you. And that's built in for free in Azure. You have to do absolutely nothing to take advantage of it besides host your workloads in Azure VMware Solution. So again, that's just the start of this conversation. And we can go through and talk about all the different layers and how we can help you meet your needs. Now, Azure VMware Solution is globally available in 33 different regions, including government regions out there. And we are spreading more every year out there. So, we have literally thousands of customers using Azure VMware Solution, and this is one of the fastest growing services at Microsoft. We have a very strong partnership with Broadcom. We just announced recently bring your own licensing with VCF licensing for Azure VMware Solution that's coming in the first half of later half of this year. And like I said, we're very strong partners with Broadcom and continuing to grow and innovate our solution and integrate it tighter into Azure as time goes. Now, we really got to start with the foundations here, Melissa, and that's backup, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Should be doing backups on-prem
And if
today.
you're not, don't worry, because we're about to help you figure out how to do that.
Yeah.
I would say probably one of the biggest issues I see with customers as they migrate to Azure VMware Solution is if you don't have the best practices in place on-prem, you might not bring the best practices to AVS, right? So that's why it's so important to kind of take the time and set the stage and get ready so that we can make sure that we're doing everything the best way possible in AVS, right? Because we're essentially getting a clean slate. So all the things we know we weren't doing right, our backups weren't quite right, we need to fix all this stuff. Now is the perfect opportunity.
Absolutely. But here's the thing is that we can do so with tools you're familiar with.
Yes.
So we don't have to have a complete retraining, but we can do it the right way with the skills you already have, with the folks you already have, and build that confidence and build new cloud skills as we ease into the solution. Now, backups, right? We have a higher RTO, higher RPO, but this should really be considered the base tier of your protection. On-prem, in the cloud, nothing's different, right? We want to make sure that all of your critical systems have backups, your databases, your application servers, whatever you need to keep your services running, we want to make sure it's backed up, right? Now, we're going to talk about other solutions with replication and things on here. Please don't mistake replication for backup because backup...
No, please don't.
Yes, provides point-in-time restore capability, which is essentially critical especially with ransomware.
Yeah, and even if we do end up replicating our more critical workloads, guess what? We still need to back them up, right? Like you said, replication is not a substitute for backup. A snapshot is not a backup. That's discussions people have all the time, right? This is the base level of protection for everything because we always need to have copies of our data in case anything happens. I mean, that is a tricky part about disaster recovery. We don't know exactly how the disaster will manifest itself until it happens, right? So we need to make sure that we're covering all our bases up front, and backup, a really solid backup plan is a great way to get started.
Absolutely. Now, one of the things, though, in the cloud we can take advantage of is the ability to have immutable storage and replicated storage. And so what we do with most customers is we back up on-prem, and then we replicate it to the cloud, and or we replicate it to multiple different regions in the cloud, and then take advantage of immutable storage capabilities in the cloud, right? So that even if ransomware attacks and it gets deeper into your infrastructure, those immutable copies cannot be changed because they are, surprise, surprise, immutable, right? Now, the other thing about tiering to the cloud is that we can also take advantage of the different storage tiers to lower your total cost of operation, which is more difficult to do on premises. So we can age out your backups to, from hot to cool to cold to archive storage in Azure to give you the retention you need at that best possible price point. So not only can we apply immutability, we can replicate it to multiple regions. We can tier the storage costs. So we're going to be able to provide you with your backup, to recover from wherever it's at, wherever you're at, whatever happens to you.
Exactly. And if you take nothing else away from this, the cloud is the place for your backups to go. I can get those different tiers at those different price and performance points, right? Without having 4 different storage arrays in my data center that I'm now managing capacity and hardware and all that kind of stuff, right? Immutable backup are table stakes at this point, Scott, don't you think? It needs to be on. It's a matter of probably one setting in your backup product, whatever you're using, and maybe one setting on your storage account. But a lot of the backup products will actually walk you through configuring your immutable backup. So it's something you should go turn on right now if you haven't, quite honestly.
Absolutely. If you're not tiering to the cloud and taking advantage of immutability, a lot of people, rely on the old term called the air gap. Air gap, I don't really think is good enough because people make mistakes. Immutability and immutable policies really lock it in to make sure that protection is permanent. And then as we go through this, we really want to make sure consistency is the key. When we're talking about adopting the cloud, one of the things that we want to do, like providing VMware in the cloud, if you're using VMware on premises, is making sure you can use the tools that are familiar to you. So we've partnered with all the top backup players in the industry, and so if you're using one of them on premises today, you can continue using it in the cloud and extend that backup capability across. So there's no need to most cases switch partners when you're doing this. We can absolutely work with those top partners that are out in the industry. So Commvault, Veritas, Veeam, Rubrik, Cohesity, Dell, with all their myriad of solutions, are all fully supported, fully integrated into Azure VMware Solution. And we can take advantage of all the innovation that our partners bring to the table as well. And if you're not using one of these solutions, they're great technologies, and we have relationships with all of these partners, and we can help introduce you. All right. So now, there's a lot of different backup and recovery scenarios out there. Business continuity disaster recovery from on-premises to an AVS site, BCDR from AVS to a secondary site. Again, we're in 33 regions around the world, so you can take advantage of that global presence and have a disaster recovery region that's greater than 500 miles away from the prior one, which meets most DR standards out there in the world. And we can mix and match these, right? It's not an either or. We can, back up from on-prem to AVS and then AVS to a second region in the cloud to kind of give you that ultimate protection. And we can tier that out based off your workload to hit your cost goals here. So, because not all workloads are equal, right? But we wanted to make sure that we give you all the capabilities for those mission critical workloads to keep them up and running for your constituents and customers in those times of need. So we've talked about backup, those table stakes for getting your workload's protected. Now we're going to, really kind of advance the conversation a little more and talk about disaster recovery. Melissa, can you take us through that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a good foundation of why we need DR. We've talked about kind of table stakes backups to get us heading in the right direction. And now let's take things a little bit further and start talking about a disaster recovery plan. Now, here's what I've seen a lot of my customers do, right? Come to Azure VMware Solution for DR. It's a great way to get started. It's very low risk, but guess what? A lot of customers end up staying. And Scott actually had a really great catchphrase that I put in here is DR is the migration you plan for. Your disaster recovery exercise and planning and testing is a great way to get familiar with AVS. Not that there's much of a learning curve, but if you've never used Azure in your life, right, you will need to use the Azure portal to log in and deploy things, which is actually super simple. One of the things I love about AVS is the documentation on Microsoft Learn, even the learning path there is just top notch, and that will get you up to speed in no time at all. So come for DR, start planning, and then once you get comfortable, you can start bringing other workloads into AVS. And, as you need more capacity, or maybe you decide you don't want to maintain 2 data centers anymore, businesses are evolving a lot these days, and AVS can absolutely be a path to enable that evolution.
Yeah. So as you're doing your disaster recovery tests and you see, oh, my applications are working great in Azure, guess what? Just don't fail back. Stop there. One,
it's fine.
Right? Turn to your neighbor, high five, right? And then you've migrated to the cloud. It's really that easy if you plan correctly for it. And I've seen many customers do this, right? They dip their toes in, they're not feeling comfortable, but then they're like, oh, hey, the water's fine. Let's jump in, right? And you're in the cloud. And then one of the main points here is that once your workload's in the cloud, you're adjacent to all the other great solutions in Azure. So OpenAI, all the analytics solutions, all the, AKS, container, PaaS services. There's 275 some odd solutions in Azure last time I counted. And trust me, it's hard to keep up.
You counted them, Scott? Really?
How
long did that take?
A long time, because I'm a big nerd. But the great thing is you're next door, right? When you're in Azure VMware Solution, you're 1 millisecond away from Azure OpenAI, right? Or less. So you could take advantage of all that together. And again, you started off with a simple DR project that was successful, and then you just stayed in the cloud. It's great.
It's fantastic. And we were talking a little bit about what does that path look like? What could it look like? And a lot of it could be just freeing up resources. Like I said, I've seen a lot of customers that just don't want to maintain 2 data centers anymore, right? They still want one. They still want to be really, really hands-on, and they're very proud of their facilities, but they don't want to do it times 2 anymore. Then a lot of times they'll find themselves in AVS, and after a while say, you know what? Do we really need to be in this data center game anymore? Is it bringing any kind of value to our business other than keeping the lights on, right? It's very operational. What if we brought everything to AVS and gave our staff more time to innovate and do things that really move the bottom line of our business? So kind of DR can be that absolute first learning path and that first toe in and that jump. And again, then you're managing as the customer management, application, operating systems of your VMs. Azure VMware Solution is all the VMware stuff. Like, guess what? You don't even have to patch VMware anymore. Azure's going to do that for you. So all these ransomware groups that are targeting VMware and everybody's getting busted because, well, vSphere 6 works fine, so I'm just going to leave it, right? AVS is going to take care of all that updating and patching for you and really even simplify your VMware operations.
Absolutely. And then again, it's going to allow you to have that time for the value add workloads in your organization, right? And that's the thing that people don't often realize is that by reducing some of that overhead on that day to day, you can really take your existing resources and maximize their value to the organization. And I know I sound like a used car salesman there, but it's true.
You don't. I don't know. I'm going to kind of miss it. So for those of you who haven't met me, I'm actually like a really small human being. I'm 5 feet tall. And I remember going into the data center to just even switch blades, and, the full size, like HP blades were really, really heavy. So like, I'm trying to like pull them out and move them because I had to move the spare to production. You don't have to do any of that stuff anymore. So this is really nice.
Yeah. And I'm a giant size human and I didn't like that stuff either.
All right, so let's talk about what we need to do before we have a DR strategy. Now, backup is table stakes. We know that. But before we decide, okay, so when do we need a backup? When do we need replication? What do we need here? We need to know our data and our workloads. And this is probably the hardest thing. And it's much more softer than going and deploying an AVS cluster in Azure, right? We need to understand our workloads and our data before we can protect them. Now, this is often driven by some sort of business requirement, which is going to be tied to some sort of cost. A lot of organizations will classify their applications by, it costs $100,000 an hour if this application goes down, this mission critical tier 1 application, right? And from there, we can kind of develop a methodology. A lot of people will go with like a gold, silver, bronze type of approach, a 3-tier approach. But within those tiers, you can absolutely get more granular to meet those business requirements. And we're talking about like true DR replication. Usually it's maybe 5% of your apps that really require that. But you've got all these app owners saying, but I have the most important application in the whole company, and I need RPO of 5 minutes and all this stuff, right? That's why we have to go back to the business requirements. That's why we got to get the business stakeholders, the tech stakeholders, everybody in the room together to hash this out so everybody has an understanding of what requirements do we actually need to meet.
Absolutely. And, I work in government, Melissa, and beyond the cost, there's, things like life safety or critical infrastructure that run in Azure. And so it's hard to put a dollar cost to it. But, if you work in a major metropolitan area and you take a train to and from work because there's no parking anywhere, and all of a sudden the scheduling system goes down and the trains can't really run and people can't get to where they need to go. I mean, that is a terrible outcome, and we want to do everything we can to make sure that doesn't happen. Or if we're working in, justice and public safety, or public service, some of these applications that are hosted in the cloud are life safety. So people's lives and well-being are on the line if they go down, and so we want to make sure that we are providing the absolutely best infrastructure and the best protection at every layer of the application so that we can keep these applications running to meet those requirements, right? So,
absolutely.
We want to help you figure out your, recovery time objective, your recovery point objective, but we also
want to make mind.
Yeah, I know. But we want to make it real into the real cost of whether it's human or dollars or, critical infrastructure, whatever that case is, we can handle it with you because, again, we're the largest cloud in the world at this point in Azure. And so working with thousands and thousands of customers, we've uncovered these best practices and we can help you implement them regardless of your size or use case.
Yes, exactly. And if you're not familiar with the terms RPO and RTO, I just wanted to talk about them real quick. A lot of times I'll say recovery objectives. So RTO is recovery time objective, how long it takes to recover. And RPO is recovery point objective, the point in time in which we're recovering to. And these numbers will be different things based on the application, right? Based on downtime or cost or human life and safety, right? So you might have one application that's, a near zero RTO and maybe a 5-minute RPO. That's a super, super important application. I might have other ones that are, a development system that's, well, maybe it's a 24-hour RPO and a 24-hour RTO because we don't really need it immediately, right? We can get through the disaster, we can get through the crisis. And if we're not actively developing our systems, well, so what, right? That's why this process is so important.
Yeah, that internal potluck tracker app that you wrote, not as mission critical as some of the others. Yeah.
So we have to make sure we're treating things that way, because it would make no sense for me to set up a true DR solution for the potluck application if we only use it once a month. And guess what? We can pass around a piece of paper or do it over email if we have to, right? That's just not as important. So when we're protecting our data, we need to keep that in mind.
Absolutely.
I like that, the potluck application. I usually say, the folder full of cat pictures, but I like the potluck apps. So like we said, not all data is equal, as we know. We need to protect our data and our apps according to the business requirements and whatever tiered structure we put into place. So what are we going to do? Are we going to replicate? Are we going to back up? Are we going to do both? We're probably going to do both in most cases because, like we said, we need to have that table stakes backup. But in some cases, the backup might not be our DR plan, right? If the backhoe comes along and cuts the cable, in that case, we're not restoring from the backup, right? We're using our replicated system. However, as we all know, ransomware is a looming threat. If we're encrypted and we're replicating that encryption, we're still in trouble, right? So in that case, we'd be restoring from backup, which means that if we're dealing with those critical applications, we need to make sure that we're taking frequent backups that align with our RPOs, because I don't want to lose that data because it's an important system. So let's talk a little bit more about replication, right? Again, this is for our most critical applications. A lot of times it's the first 5 to 10, 5-10% of our apps. And there is different types of replication, right? There's replicating our VMs, there's replicating storage, there's replicating our backup storage, right? Because we might replicate our backups someplace else. In fact, we should be replicating our backups someplace else, like to Azure, in an immutable fashion. So we're ready for everything, right? But replication is kind of this broad technology that is really, really important. Like, what good is a backup if it never leaves the data center that the backhoe comes to, right? It's no good. So we always need to keep in mind that there's different levels of replication that we need to keep in mind when we're doing a DR type of thing.
Yeah, and to that point, Melissa, distance matters.
It does.
I worked with customers and they said, "Oh, our DR facility is 100 miles apart. We're fine."
Are you on the same power grid?
Well, in this particular one, until the absolutely gigantic forest fire that consumed both data centers within a week of each other. Now, luckily, we were able to get that customer's data out of their data centers in time, but it was a mad rush, and nobody wants to be in that situation, right? So having a replication site that's greater than 500 miles away is really critical for allowing you to be outside of that disaster zone.
Yeah, and I have a really good example too. Scott is on the West Coast. I'm on the East Coast, right? So East Coast is known for hurricanes. So if we've got a hurricane coming up the coast and wreaking havoc, and you have 2 sites on the East Coast, even if they're a couple hundred miles from each other, you could still be in a lot of potential problems. I've actually seen that with customers. It was like, we thought we were okay, but guess what? The hurricane hit both places, so we had a lot of problems, which goes back to AVS and it being available in 33 different regions, right? So I could go by coastal, I could go to Europe if I wanted to, right? I can pretty much go anywhere I want. And keeping in mind, I do have that Microsoft backbone network working for me.
Absolutely. Lots of choices.
So when we're talking about replication, like a VM level replication, it can be fairly expensive in the sense of I am going to have reserved failover capacity in most cases, right? So if I've got 6 nodes on-prem, I'm probably going to be, and I'm replicating everything, I'm probably going to build, okay, I don't want to say I'm going to build 6 nodes in AVS. I'm assuming the hosts are the same size. If I've got the same size hosts in both places, it's going to be like for like, right? I need to have the same amount of capacity I have in production in DR for my top apps so that I could get the lowest level RTO. That means I have hosts, that means I have storage, that means I have a lot of cost associated with it. So again, for those top workloads, but then I can get creative. I might have an architecture in AVS while I have a smaller DR cluster. And once I see DR going underway, right, maybe I have enough capacity for those first couple apps, but then I start scaling my AVS cluster, right? Because we can do those types of things. We can scale when we need to.
Melissa, wouldn't we have to get a purchase order and mail it in, and then wait for a server to arrive, and then rack it, stack it?
I'm trying to count how many clicks it would actually take me to deploy a new host, and I think like 3 or 4 from when I log in to the Azure portal.
Right. I forgot. It only takes 30 minutes to get new hosts in Azure.
Exactly. So right. It's kind of amazing to have this on-demand capacity, so I can find maybe a more cost-effective solution. Again, protecting some of those more critical workloads, but maybe my tier 2, I decide, okay, for tier 2 recovery, I need to scale AVS first. Yeah, it's great. I think I'm going to have to go check this when we're done, but I think you can deploy a host in about 4 clicks. I'm going to have to get back to you.
Well, there's a slider. And that slider is really cool because you can be like, I need 8. And you go there and you hit submit, and then the magic elves, Azure elves in the background.
And again, like if I'm using AVS, I'm using the Azure portal, but I can't stress how small the learning curve is. The Azure portal is simple to use. It's very intuitive. I can search for exactly what I need in the search bar. It's a very, very small learning curve. Can you tell I kind of like AVS, right? Like just a little bit. It's awesome.
I like it too.
I know.
But
Right? So now we want to talk about a little bit of an example that we're going to call like the ultimate DR solution here. So if I'm an organization, a larger organization, or even a smaller organization, I have a couple different tiers of service. What might my environment look like, right? So the simplest way, and I understand that not everything is a one size fits all approach, is to try to establish tiers of availability or service within what you're offering your external customers. Like I see a lot of like gold, silver, bronze, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. Try to simplify as much as you can. And then when we do have edge cases, right, we can get more granular and develop something really specific for something within a tier if the business drives it. These tiers of service will also help you in kind of the business impact analysis where you're trying to figure out your recovery objectives. Because when you put kind of a table in front of an application owner in black and white, okay, here's our gold, here's our silver, here's our bronze, that might help them along the way to make their decisions versus kind of giving them carte blanche and be like, well, you come to me and you tell me what you need and I'll make it happen, right? So it could be a really good guide for those discussions with those application owners and business owners.
Well, and one of the key differences in Azure, Melissa, is that we can attribute specific costs to each of those tiers. Whereas when you're buying on premises, you're buying an aggregate of hardware. And so it's just sitting there. So, zero downtime is free, right? We all know it's not. But in the cloud, we know, okay, if we're going to do the gold solution, it costs X to do that for this application. This is Y for the silver or Z for the bronze. And then we can put the cost and the RPO, RTO for gold, silver, bronze in front of your business customers, and then let them choose which price point and service level is applicable to them. Because, in my experience, customers always go, oh yeah, I need zero downtime.
Let me get the bill.
Yeah. You mean you need zero downtime for the
we can do that for
tracking
you,
app? Okay, well, we'll make that globally available, hot, multi-region.
Replicate it everywhere. We're going to replicate the Potluck application to all 33 Azure regions, just so it's always there.
Exactly. That important. But seriously, right, we can, put costs to service levels to make it real for your business owners. So instead of you having as IT, kind of be in that uncomfortable spot, we can lay it out as a simple menu and let your business owners make the choice, document it, and then implement it quickly with you.
And I've seen a lot of customers when we really get a handle on these tiers of service, and we can do it kind of with all the things like Azure Immutable Storage, right? We find that maybe we can offer a higher tier of service for some applications just because we've spent all this time dialing it in and we truly understand in black and white, like the cost synergies between each tier, which is always a nice thing, right? We always want to protect everything as much as we can to meet those business requirements. And, when you're looking at something like AVS for disaster recovery, right, you're not going to be in the situation where you are on-prem where you're just going to be like, well, you know what, these apps, they don't even get a plan because that's just not going to happen. There's no way we could get the capacity. There's no way we could do this. There's no way we can do that. I've seen a lot of those kind of orphan applications that just kind of drop off the list, right? Because, well, we just can't spend all this money on DR, right? With the AVS model, that fundamentally changes.
Absolutely. We can give you a backup plan that's reasonable in cost, reasonable in performance, hitting RPO and RTO marks for every single app in your organization.
Exactly. And, we have been talking about cost a lot. So gold, silver, bronze. What I like to also say is like good, better, best. Good is backing up, right? We all need to back up. If you have nothing but a backup, you're still in a really good situation, right? And then we get into more point kind of DR solutions. A better solution would be replicating that backup to blob storage, right? So we have it in AVS and Azure ready to go where we need it. And Scott's going to talk about a product called Jetstream that can really help you do a lot of amazing things with DR. And then kind of like the best solution where we talk about full VM replication is something that you may already be familiar with, VMware Site Recovery Manager. Guess what? You can bring that to AVS with you. You can use SRM on-prem to AVS or between AVS regions. So a lot of, again, all these tools that you're used to, you bring them along for the ride, right? It's a great opportunity to make sure that you have your processes down and you're doing everything the right way. But if you have a really solid DR plan right now, just bring SRM, right? Just bring everything. It's good to go.
Yeah, it's already built in, already works. You can keep your same IP address. You can re-IP as you fail over. That's the beauty of going to the cloud is we have tons of options and lots of flexibility to help you implement to your business requirements.
Exactly. Speaking of different levels of flexibility and stuff like that, let's kind of visualize this a little bit more. So we've talked about all the different ways we can do this, backup and recovery, and here's some kind of RPO guidelines that we like to use. But again, we can get really granular with whatever you decide when you look at your business is the most important thing. We got our backups, RPO 24 to 72 hours, RTO 24 hours to 1 week. You would actually be surprised how fast you can restore backups within Azure. So even with backups, you could probably blow away these numbers if you needed to. But again, it comes back to our business requirements and what do we actually need to protect against, right?
Absolutely. And making sure that we've planned ahead and make sure that data is in the spot where you need it to be. That's really the most critical part.
That's an important one.
Yeah, because I had a customer that's like, oh, we need to restore to the cloud. Well, where's the data? It's on-prem. How much data is it? Half a petabyte. How fast can we get it there? A long time, right? Well, I need it tomorrow. Okay. Well, we're going to have some fun making this work. So, that's the one message I can really, if I could, everyone to take away is, hey, plan ahead here. And if at minimum you've just got your backups replicated to the cloud, that's going to be a huge step up from where you potentially are today. But there's a value on all these different service levels. And again, we can help you get there, regardless of whether it's money or people or citizen services that are on the line. We can help you meet those goals, and again, at a cost-effective, predictable, replicatable solution that we can grow with you.
Exactly. And like I said, there's all different tiers we can play with it. You're going to be able to design a solution that meets your requirements and meets your budget with AVS, right? So we might have where we're just replicating data to an alternative technology that we're going to use for restorations later. We might have a warm site. Like I said, we might just have 3 AVS hosts kind of waiting there with all our core services that we need, and we scale them as we need to. And then we get into the really aggressive stuff for our tier 1 apps. We're talking about replication and multiple locations, very low RPOs and RTOs. And again, all these different things are achievable using different tools that you might be already using today. So let's dive a little bit more into some of the tooling. We're going to start with VMware Site Recovery Manager, right? If you're using it today, bring it along. It's a great solution for business continuity and DR planning and testing, right? And if we're talking hybrid, where we're going from on-prem to AVS, it works. And AVS to AVS, it's also a great solution, right? And like I said, a lot of customers are using this today. You can bring it with you, and we can do a lot of different DR testing ahead of time. Because it's the other thing that no one really talks about is we need to actually test our disaster recovery plan before we need to use it, right? I've done a lot of DR in my career, and I remember doing DR tests with a clipboard. I might have dated myself a little bit, and it was well, it kind of works. So we passed our DR test, high fives all around, right? That was not a real world test, right? We need to be doing real world DR testing because you can't fail a DR test, right? If it doesn't work, that's the opportunity you need to go back and fix it. So when disaster does strike, it actually works for you. So VMware SRM, right? We have a multi-site operation here. We have vCenter, we have SRM, but at the heart of it is vSphere replication. So we're going to use vSphere replication to replicate our whole VMs, right? We're actually VM level replicating across sites. So we're not replicating our backups in this case and using them for recovery, even though we will replicate our backups, right? We have one VM here, we're sending its replica over there. So we have a super, super low RTO. The RTO is how long it takes the VM to boot once you hit go, right? So you hit the button, the VM comes online, and you're up and running in no time at all. And when we're talking about an RPO, it's like a 5-minute RPO we're talking about, right? So 5 minutes of data loss, and it takes what? I don't know how long. I haven't actually counted how long it takes a VM to boot in AVS, but it's pretty fast, right? Like it's a reboot,
we can actually get sub 1 minute RPO and about 1 to 2 minute RTO on some of these solutions.
But the documentation will tell you a 5-minute RPO. But there's things. There's things.
Yeah. There's tricks here.
There's tricks, and we got the tricks.
Yeah, and then again, to note here, when we talked about the different patterns here, you can protect from on-prem to the cloud, and then I've had customers do this. Again, you just don't fail over, and then you start protecting from cloud region A to cloud region B, and you migrate, right? Like it's that simple to do it. So, and DR is going to protect you, and it's a great way to step into the cloud, get that confidence you need that you're doing the right thing for your business to keep it up and running and at the levels you need. And then, if we help you do this correctly, you can get the best compliment in my mind that you can receive in IT, which is, I had no idea that anything happened. Right?
That is true. And that's not the only solution available in AVS, of course. Scott, why don't you take over a little bit and let's talk a little bit more about Jetstream.
Yeah, thanks, Melissa. So Jetstream is another partner that works with Azure VMware Solution, and they do replication, but they do it a little bit differently than other folks out there. So VM fell over to AVS. Jetstream works by writing it to either the vSAN store or to another storage account like Azure NetApp Files or Blob, so that we can create a tiered disaster recovery solution from a cost perspective.
And this is a big fundamental difference from SRM right here, that ability to go off to a different storage that isn't your production storage.
Exactly. So what this allows us to do is protect your most critical workloads to the vSAN in AVS. But then, maybe the next tier down goes to Azure NetApp Files, which is a mapped vSAN store as your secondary tier. And then Blob would be a tertiary store. Each of those storage tiers lower the cost of ownership, and you don't have to have the same number of AVS nodes running in the cloud as you do on premises. And that's, we're getting back to, we're in a DR event. I need to provision more AVS nodes at that point as I'm doing my restores, so I can bring that compute to bear and rehydrate those replications from either the NetApp Files or Elastic-SAN, which is coming soon, or Azure Blob Storage. So all of those different storage tiers are supported with Jetstream. And so, it provides that key difference there. So it's fully integrated into AVS, meets all of our security and operations requirements in there. And is utilizing VMware certified filters to do this. So, just like your other VMware certified backup solutions, this one is built with VMware Online, but it is unique to AVS. Jetstream is a unique Azure VMware solution. And it's just an example of the innovation that happens in our environment that Microsoft is fostering with our partners. So with Jetstream, we're able to take advantage of the trade-offs between RTO and disaster recovery costs. Because since not every workload needs to be protected at that same super high level, we can, again, tier those out into different storage tiers with different cost impacts on you, so that we can provide you the right level of protection at the right time, at the right price. And I often find that is really a critical component of offering disaster recovery services to businesses, is that we got to make sure that we're pricing it accordingly. Because, people are you have a limited amount of funds, whether it's governments or businesses, and we need to make sure that people are spending those funds properly and responsibly and have choices to do so.
Exactly. Yeah. And, one thing we've been focusing on today is that it's not a one size fits all approach, right? We do have the ability to get super granular to meet those business requirements and those cost requirements. So Jetstream is a fantastic solution as part of, your greater DR and backup plan to make sure that we can hit those numbers in a way that works for your business.
And Jetstream is fully integrated to AVS. We've got it so that you can go to the Azure portal to kick off a Jetstream install and install the server components to on-premises as well to help you through that. And so it's a fully vetted, Azure approved solution, and you can buy it through the Azure Marketplace. So it's a one-stop shop to get this protection. Now, Jetstream on AVS, we can do that hybrid disaster recovery from on-premises. Because again, we're going to have that Jetstream disaster recovery virtual appliance on-prem, and it's going to replicate to that workload resource pool. And it's going to be able to then replicate that storage to your storage target of choice. You can have VPN or express route connectivity. There's not a hard requirement for either. Now, if we're doing Azure VMware Solution to Azure VMware Solution protection with Jetstream, we can do it similarly. And again, the key advantage here is that we don't have to have the same number of nodes running in the recovery region as we do the production region. So say you've got 25, 26 AVS nodes running in production, maybe you have 3, 4, 5 running in your recovery region. And so you're saving on that cost month to month. But then when you trigger that restore with Jetstream, right, you're going to start spinning up more AVS nodes on the recovery side and then hydrating those replicated VMs from the blob storage into the vSAN store to recover them. So that your most critical ones will already be on the vSAN and will be there quicker, and then your less critical workloads will get hydrated over time and come up to speed inside of your recovery time objective window. So again, we're back to the sliding scale of RPO to RTO versus cost, right? So we have a lot of options out there to help you realize your requirements for RPO and RTO, and do so in a way that's responsible to the business. And I really want to say thank you for attending the event today, and I want to extend a huge thank you to Melissa Palmer, who's been a great co-host for this event today. It's been really fun having this conversation with you.
Yeah, this has been a great conversation. I'm ready to use all the different products to protect that Potluck app, one of those really critical ones. But all joking aside, thank you so much for your partnership on this, Scott. I hope that our customers are taking away that at the end of the day, we can help you build a DR solution that meets your business requirements, including your cost requirements, and we can make sure that we have all of your data protected. So when something does happen, you are ready to recover at a moment's notice.
Awesome. Thanks, Melissa. And if you're interested in finding out more about Azure VMware Solution or your business continuity and disaster recovery options in Azure, your local Microsoft account team can help out, reach out to them. And if they have questions, they can reach out to us. And we're here to help you realize and make this real in your environment. Thank you.
Thank you.